The day after my 38th birthday, I was diagnosed with a craniopharyngioma brain tumor, and I was going to have brain surgery. This is part 2 of that story. And I'm not a medical professional, I'm only restating things as I remember them to be. On Thursday, I got a call from the Neuroscience Institute. It was from someone named John, who was going to be my patient care coordinator. I never got to meet him in real life, but he was one of my favorite people. He was very patient, very knowledgeable, and answered all of the questions I had about my upcoming appointments. And boy, I had a lot of upcoming appointments. He walked me through the list of all the different doctors and tests I would be having and scheduled them all for me. Then he let me know I could call him at any time, and he'd help figure out all of the logistics. My first appointment was for the next day on Friday with a neuro-ophthalmologist. I didn't even know such a thing existed, but I found out that a neuro-ophthalmologist is not the same as an ophthalmologist, which is not the same as an optometrist. All of them are eye doctors, but the neuro-ophthalmologist specializes in vision problems that originate in your brain, which is suspected to be the root of my recent vision loss. The appointment started like any other eye doctor that I'd visited before, where you look at the chart with the letters on it, and they ask you to read the smallest row you could see. And I couldn't read any of them. They had to flip the screen a couple times, and finally I was able to see the big letter at the very top. Next was one of my favorite tests, where you try and read the numbers amongst all the colored dots. Eric is colorblind, so he could never see the numbers. But this time, neither could I. And that was surprising, but also very interesting. After the test, we got to meet the doctor. I really liked him. He was nice and explained things really well. He showed us the MRI images. I'd never seen an MRI before, let alone one of my own brain. Right away, we could see where the tumor was. The doctor showed us how the optic nerves cross right at the optic chiasm, and that's where they connect to the brain. And this is where the tumor sat, pressing down on that optic chiasm, causing my vision loss. He said he suspected my vision would return to normal after the surgery, but really they wouldn't know until they got in there and took a look. The doctor asked us if we had any questions, and finally I was able to ask the one thing that had been on my mind since the second we saw the MRI, which was, is it possible, even just slightly, that that tumor is full of baby spiders? You know, like in that urban legend? That was not the question the doctor was expecting to hear. But Eric and I laughed and laughed and laughed. But the doctor did say he was pretty sure that it didn't have any baby spiders in it. And then we left, a little bit freaked out, but still laughing, and I went to work for the rest of the day. Monday was the big day of appointments. The first one was with the endocrinologist. We liked this doctor right away. She talked a little bit fast, but she gave us a ton of information. She explained that the tumor was sitting right on top of my pituitary gland and possibly causing some disruptions with my hormones. She explained that some of these hormones are essential to life, and the others have a dramatic impact on the quality of life. And I'd be getting some blood work done to see what was going on with mine. They'd be testing my thyroid, but based off of all the blood work I'd had over the years, we knew that was normal. But they'd also be testing my prolactin, my cortisol, my growth hormone, some various sex hormones, and some other hormones as well. She then went on to say that the tumor could have been in there for as long as 10 years. And Eric and I were both like, whoa, 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 whoa! You need to tell us, is it more than 10 years or less than 10 years? And she was like, I can't tell you that. There's no way of us knowing for sure. So Eric and I explained that we needed to know because we had just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary in January. And if the tumor had been in there less than 10 years, then Eric gave it to me. But if it had been in there more than 10 years, that meant that Eric married damaged goods. And then Eric and I laughed and laughed and laughed. She did not laugh, but instead probably wondered how she could fire me as a patient. After Eric and I were done cracking ourselves up, she went on to say that the tumor had probably been in there for some period of time until only recently it decided to start causing symptoms. And then I remembered that we went cross-country skiing in January, and I crashed, and maybe the trauma of that kicked it into gear. Otherwise, it must have been when I was trying to change my cell phone carrier, because we all know there's nothing worse than trying to get your cell phone service figured out. The next appointment was with the neurosurgeon. I really liked him. He did not laugh, he did not smile, but he explained things really well. He showed us the MRI again, and went through all of the things that we had heard from the other doctors. The only new piece was about the pituitary stalk, which is what allows the pituitary and the brain to talk to each other. And the tumor was likely pushing on it or stuck to it. He wouldn't know until he got in there and took a look. So then he started talking about how we were going to get the tumor out. The first option is transphenoidal. I don't really know how to pronounce it. But they go up through your nose and they pull it out that way. I interrupted him and was like, "You mean like the ancient Egyptians?" To which he responded, "Yes, kind of like the ancient Egyptians." The other option, and his preferred option, was a craniotomy, where he would cut a hole in my head and dig around until they found the tumor and take it out that way. He preferred this option because he'd be able to see better and be more aggressive and hopefully get more, if not all, of the tumor out. And then I had some questions. I didn't joke around with this doctor. I didn't really have anything to joke around about. But I did ask, there's a lot of brains in there, and that tumor's in the middle of them. How are you going to get to it? He said that they would just shrink my brains, which would make more space and allow them to move it around easier. I almost fell out of my chair when he said that. But then he backpedaled a little bit and said they'd actually use some medication to temporarily dehydrate it to make it a little bit smaller. I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. But then I asked, would my personality change? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, yeah, possibly. And without missing a beat, Eric interjected with, "I'll give her 1 year to see how this new personality works out." And we laughed and laughed and laughed. The doctor did not laugh, but that's okay. And then I asked if they were going to have to shave my head. Would I be bald? He said no. They would have to cut some of my hair, but they would try to do the least amount possible. But to keep in mind that he was a brain surgeon and not a hairstylist. And then we scheduled the surgery for May 17th, which was in 10 days, but it was also 2 days before the World Championships, crushing my dreams of wearing my Team USA supersuit and having my name on my butt. We left that appointment and went straight to get a bunch of blood drawn, and then followed that up with a CT scan. If I understand correctly, a CT scan is more like an X-ray. It was super quick and uneventful. The best part was the technician. His name was Monty, and he wore scrubs that were all denim, head to toe. He told me that he'd most likely be the one to do my CT scan immediately after surgery, although I'd probably be too out of it to notice. I made a mental note. I was going to try really hard to remember and say hello. The other notable thing about the CT scan was a disproportionate number of motocross and dirt bike magazines in the waiting area. The first order of business for Tuesday morning was to talk to my boss and let him know what was going on, and that I was going to be out for a while. We were going to need to figure out a plan, and quickly. He was really concerned with what was going on, and was really helpful and encouraging. But when I told him that my personality might change, he did say, "Maybe it'll be better." I kind of laughed, and if Eric had said it, I would have thought it was really funny, but I just wasn't sure if he was kidding or not. The rest of the day was spent figuring out who was going to do what while I was out. Those charts and graphs were not going to make themselves. Everybody I told expressed concern, although one person did say it was going to be really hard on them to have to do all of that extra work while I was out. And someone else asked why I anticipated being out so long when someone else they knew had had brain surgery and was only out for 2 weeks. I think they all meant well, but I don't know. The original plan for Saturday was to go to a mountain bike race in Eastern Washington, but that was no longer an option. But our friends Amy and Lauren invited us to spend the weekend at their house, and we took them up on the offer. And instead of mountain biking that day, we went for a walk along the river. It was a 4-mile trail, but not even partway through, I really started to struggle. I was exhausted, and I was getting sick. And this was shocking to me. I was supposed to be racing in the World Championships in a week, and now I couldn't even walk 4 miles. But afterwards, we went back to Lauren and Amy's, and I slept for the rest of the day and into the night. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling better. It was Mother's Day, and I was excited to celebrate it with my own kids, but also with my own mom. We had brunch, and then we walked along the Puget Sound, enjoying the beautiful views. It was a beautiful day, and I was feeling all of the love. But then I started to feel sick again, and I got a really bad headache, so we had to go home. I went straight to bed and slept for a few hours, but when I woke up, I was still sick, and I still had that horrible headache. So I called the Neuroscience Institute, and they told me to go straight to the emergency room. Once there, I told them what was going on, and they called my neurosurgeon and the endocrinologist, and then they started doing blood work, and they injected me with a bunch of painkillers and other things that I don't even know what they were. What I did know was that I didn't like them at all. Felt like they'd put a 50-pound bag of cement on my chest, and my arms and legs went numb. I also was introduced to these amazing blue barf bags. You just barf right into them. And it holds all of it in a nice, neat little package. What a genius invention. I finally started to relax, and Eric was able to take advantage of all the fun things he could do with those barf bags. Once I was stable, they let me go home with a stack of barf bags in my hand. I was supposed to work Monday and Tuesday, but they said, absolutely do not go to work Monday and Tuesday. Which is good, because there's no way I would have been able to last even 5 minutes in the office. The next few days went by very quickly. I got the results back from my blood work from the previous week. My growth hormone was really high, like really high. So high that they were concerned that I had started to develop acromegaly. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but in kids, it's usually called giganticism. But in adults, symptoms include enlargement of the face, hands, and feet. I wasn't developing any of those distinctions at this point, but they wanted to figure out what was going on. So I had to go to the ambulatory infusion center, where they would take a control blood sample, and then they would inject something, then take another sample every 30 minutes for the next 3 hours to see if anything changed. It wasn't super fun, but it went by quicker than I thought it would. Turned out I did not have acromegaly. I just had really high growth hormone. They suspected because of all the athletic training I had been doing, but they really couldn't say for sure. Later I met with someone to talk about all the things I needed to know and do before surgery and once I came home. I was going to have to take a weird antiseptic shower, both the night before and the morning of the surgery. I was told I shouldn't even ask if I could take the tumor home with me once they took it out. There were very clear instructions to not let the cats clean the incision site. But if they couldn't clean it, who was going to? Lastly, I had to fill out and sign an advance directive in case something went horribly wrong during the surgery. It hadn't even occurred to me that something could go wrong until that point. Once the papers were signed, the appointments were over, and the tests were complete, I went home to spend time with my family. And Eric and I needed to tell the kids what was going on. They were only 6 and 8 years old, so we hadn't told them anything yet. We didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. We figured they suspected something, especially after the trip to the emergency room earlier in the week. But we struggled with how much to tell them. We wanted to tell them the truth, but we also didn't want to scare them. So we said that I had something in my brain that was making me not feel well, and that the doctors were going to take it out. I was going to be in the hospital for a couple of days, but then I'd come home. Our older kid asked me if I was going to have anesthesia, and when I said yes, he started to cry, telling me how I was not going to like it. He had had surgery just a few months before, so he knew, and it broke my heart to see him so sad and upset over it. But I tried to reassure him that it was going to be okay, that I was going to be okay. Once the kids were tucked into bed, I kind of started to go manic. I needed to clean the house, every single inch of the house, right then and there, until I just couldn't fight it anymore. So I took the weird antiseptic shower, which smelled like cigarette ash, and I crawled into bed, and I waited for tomorrow to arrive.